You think you know someone. You share a childhood bedroom, secrets whispered in the dark, promises to always have each other's backs. You trust them with your deepest wounds, your most fragile dreams. Then, on the night your world is supposed to begin anew, amid the confetti and champagne toasts of a glittering New Year's Eve party, with Happy New Year 2026 blazing in gold foil behind her, your own sister, your only family, stands before a crowd of 200 of the city's elite and names you a liability. A fragile, unstable charity case who nearly bankrupted your late mother's legacy with your grief. She speaks with such elegant pity, her hand over her heart, as she announces she's had to take full control of the multi-million-dollar inheritance to protect mother's wishes. The room swivels to look at you. A mix of scorn and sympathy in their eyes. You feel the ground vanish. The money that was meant to secure your future, to build the foundation your mother wanted for you, is gone, legally and publicly handed to her. You stand there, hollowed out, in the dress she bought you, in the penthouse she owns, surrounded by people who now see you as a broken thing. And as the painful applause dies down, your hand in your pocket brushes the cold, smooth surface of your phone. The recording app is still running. It has been for 47 minutes. It captured every whispered conspiracy with her lawyer, before the speech, every calculated, venomous word of her public execution of your character. She didn't know. She didn't know I recorded everything. And that was the moment I knew, the real revenge begins now. The silence after the party was a physical thing, a thick, smothering blanket that filled the elevator, as I descended from her 60-story penthouse to the rainy New York street. The recorded audio was a searing brand in my pocket, a nuclear core of truth humming against my thigh. I was Alara Vance, 34, a ghost in my own life. For the past year, since our mother's death from the swift, brutal cancer that stole her in 3 months, I had been adrift in a fog of pain. Cassandra, my elder by 3 years, had been the anchor, the executor, the strong one. She handled the funeral, the legal filings, the mountain of paperwork. Just focus on healing, Elle, she'd say, her voice a soothing balm. I'll handle everything. Mother wanted us to be taken care of. I believed her. We were sisters. The inheritance was a complex mix of liquid assets, real estate, and stock portfolios. Our mother was a shrewd, quiet investor. The will, which I'd seen briefly in a haze of grief, specified a clear, equal split. But Cassandra spoke of tax burdens and liquidity issues, of trusts and staggered distributions that sounded reasonable in my vulnerable state. I signed what she put in front of me, my signature a shaky scrawl on a dozen documents I was too heartsick to comprehend. Now, walking through the neon, reflected puddles of Midtown, the cold January rain mixing with the salt on my cheeks, I saw the architecture of her deceit with horrifying clarity. The staggered distributions were a funnel, straight into her accounts. The trust was a cage with her as the sole keyholder. My own apartment, a cozy West Village walk up I loved, had been subtly suggested as a drain on resources. Let's sell it, pool the equity, it's smarter. I was now living in a corporate rental she managed, another tether. My job as a freelance architectural historian, a quiet life of research and occasional lectures, she'd framed as a charming hobby, not a real career. Her narrative, perfected over months, had painted me as the dreamy, incapable younger sibling, a portrait she'd unveiled with devastating finality tonight. She was Cassandra Vance, rising star at Valor Investments, a woman who lunched with mayors and featured in Forbes' 30 under 40 lists. I was the problem she'd gracefully solved. Back in my sterile rental, the echoes of the party's mockery still ringing in my ears, I poured a finger of cheap whiskey, a defiant rejection of her vintage champagne, and plugged my phone into my laptop. I transferred the audio file, labeled it with the date, and for the first time I listened. Not as a devastated sister, but as a strategist. The quality was crisp. The phone's microphone having captured the pre-speech murmurs from her private study where I'd left my wrap. I heard her voice, not the polished, sympathetic tone of the party, but a low, cold wire of sound. The last of the documents are filed, James. she said to her lawyer, James Croft. His voice, a dry rasp, replied. The competency affidavit from Dr. Rosen sealed it. With her history of anxiety, and that residential treatment after the mother's death, the judge was sympathetic to your petition for full financial guardianship. It's all legal, Cassandra. Air tight. My blood turned to ice. Residential treatment. It was a 2-week grief counseling retreat she'd insisted I attend. It'll help you process, she'd said. It had helped. But in her hands it had become a weapon. Proof of instability. My breath hitched as the recording continued. Good, Cassandra said. Olara will never be able to manage this kind of wealth. It's a mercy. Really, I'll keep her comfortable, of course. A modest allowance. She'll never have to worry. A soft chuckle. She'll probably thank me eventually. Then the sound of glasses clinking. To the new year, Croft said. To Vaylor's newest senior partner. Cassandra replied, her voice dripping with ambition. The capital from the liquidated Vance assets will push my bid over the edge. Mother's money will finally do something important. The next week was a performance of shattered normalcy. I attended the therapy sessions Cassandra, gently encouraged, nodding as the therapist, likely on her payroll, spoke about acceptance and family boundaries. I accepted the first allowance transfer, a fraction of what the interest on my share should have been, with a meek text of thanks. I saw her for a tense lunch at a sleek, overpriced restaurant in the financial district. She was all concerned warmth, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. You look better, Elle. Less strained. I know the party was a lot, but it was necessary. To manage perceptions. For both our sakes. Her eyes, the same hazel as mine but sharper, harder, searched my face for defiance. I let my gaze drop, feigning a fragility that was now a costume. I know you're doing what you think is best, Cass. I murmured, stirring my soup. It's just hard to feel so powerless. The lie tasted like ash, but it was convincing. A flicker of satisfaction crossed her features, quickly masked by sisterly sympathy. It's not powerlessness, sweetie. It's protection. Inside, the recording played on a loop, my private anthem of rage. The revenge, I decided, would not be a blunt instrument. A public leak of the audio would cause a scandal, but she'd spin it, a sister's distorted, jealous fantasy, taken out of context. It might not unravel the legal guardianship, built on manipulated medical opinion and forged documents of my instability. No, I had to use the recording as a key, not a hammer. It was a map to the weak points in her fortress. James Croft was the first target. His law firm, Croft and Vetter, was old money respectable, but a deep dive into business filings and society gossip hinted at a firm weathering quiet storms. Croft had a taste for high-stakes poker and a son with a failing tech startup. He needed Cassandra's capital and her future business, as much as she needed his flexible ethics. I began my own campaign. A shadow life running parallel to my performative recovery. My historical research skills turned to forensic finance. I tracked shell companies, cross-referenced property deeds, and followed digital money trails through public databases. Late nights in dim libraries and my small apartment were spent piecing together the puzzle. The liquidated Vance assets weren't just sitting in a trust. They were being moved, layered, leveraged as collateral for Cassandra's bid to become senior partner and lead a massive, controversial waterfront development project. Mother's legacy was to be turned into a monument to Cassandra's ambition, a project, my research suggested, that involved shady land acquisitions and promised environmental cuts. The psychological warfare was constant. I would send her ambiguous articles about sibling loyalty or the long-term psychological effects of betrayal, with innocent subject lines like, "Thought of you?" She'd call, her voice tight, and I'd play confused, saying I was just sharing something that moved me. I began to subtly reclaim my identity. I used my allowance to take a course in financial auditing. I reconnected with old college friends, carefully vetting them first, rebuilding a network outside her sphere. I was a phantom learning to be solid again. The breaking point came in early March. Cassandra summoned me to the Valor Investments headquarters, a glass spire that pierced the gray Manhattan sky. The boardroom was a temple of cold power, all smoked glass and a view that dwarfed the city. She stood at the head of the table, not sitting. "Alara," she began, her voice devoid of its usual performative warmth. "I've heard you've been active. Asking questions about Mother's estate with people you really shouldn't be talking to." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face still. "I'm trying to understand, Cass. For my own peace of mind." She walked around the table, her heels clicking a slow, intimidating rhythm. "Your peace of mind is my concern. That's why I've made a decision. The city is clearly a trigger for your anxieties. I've arranged a place for you upstate, quiet, supportive. You can focus on your health indefinitely." It was a prettier prison. A gilded cage in the countryside, where I could be more easily managed, forgotten. I knew then the time for subtlety was over. I looked out at the panoramic view, then back at her. "Mother's favorite song was Moon River," I said quietly. "She'd hum it when she gardened." A flicker of confusion in Cassandra's eyes. "What's your point?" "On the recording," I continued, my voice flat and calm. "The one I made at your New Year's party. Just before your speech, you and James Croft are discussing the competency affidavit. At one point, you hum a few bars of Moon River, an old absent-minded habit. You were thinking of her. Even as you were stealing from her." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. All the color drained from Cassandra's face, leaving her porcelain complexion looking like cracked marble. Her composure, for the first time in my life, shattered. "Yo, you recorded." "I have the file in multiple encrypted locations," I said, standing up, meeting her gaze squarely. "It details the conspiracy to commit fraud, the manipulation of medical testimony, the admission of intent to misappropriate funds. It doesn't just embarrass you, Cassandra, it implicates Croft. It unravels the entire legal basis of your guardianship and casts a very dark shadow over your financing for the waterfront project." I leaned forward, my hands on the cool table. "The quiet, supportive place upstate. You can move there. I hear it's lovely in the spring." What followed was a tense, silent war fought in lawyers' offices and through terse emails. I hired my own attorney, a fierce woman named Naomi Reyes, paid for with a carefully rationed portion of a loan from a trusted friend. My first independent act in over a year. We played the recording for James Croft in a neutral conference room. Hearing his own voice, so casually damning, broke him. He folded immediately, agreeing to petition the court to dissolve the guardianship and to provide a sworn affidavit detailing his actions under Cassandra's direction, in exchange for my agreement not to file a complaint with the Bar Association. His betrayal of her was as swift and cold as hers had been of me. Cassandra fought with the terrifying, cornered intensity of a predator. There were threats veiled as concern, offers of a larger allowance, even a lump sum settlement. That was a fraction of what was mine. I remained silent, letting my lawyer speak, letting the threat of the audio do its work. The final meeting was in a different, smaller boardroom. The atmosphere was funereal. Cassandra was there, her elegance brittle, her eyes hollow. The family judge was present, along with both lawyers and a court-appointed financial auditor. The recording was entered into evidence. Hearing it in that formal setting, the voices echoing in the quiet room, was profoundly surreal. When the part about Dr. Rosen and the manipulated competency affidavit played, Cassandra flinched as if struck. The settlement was comprehensive and brutal. The guardianship was annulled. All assets were to be immediately and publicly reconciled, with a full forensic audit at Cassandra's expense. My share was returned, with interest calculated at the highest permissible rate. The Vance family name was to be removed from her waterfront project. In exchange, I agreed not to release the recording publicly or pursue criminal charges for fraud, provided she adhered to every term. It wasn't about sending her to jail. It was about stripping her of what she'd stolen, and what she valued most: control, reputation, and the power built on our mother's money. On a cool April evening, I stood in my reclaimed West Village apartment, boxes of my returned belongings around me. The space smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I had a notification on my screen, the first full transfer of my rightful funds, clearing into an account in my name only. The silence was my own. And it was peaceful. I walked to the window looking out at the quiet street. Down the block, a news ticker on a corner electronics store flashed a headline. Valor Investments faces scrutiny over waterfront bid. Lead partner Cassandra Vance steps down. I felt no triumphant thrill, only a deep, wary solidity. The revenge was complete. It wasn't sweet, it was a bitter, necessary medicine. She had tried to erase me, to turn me into a footnote in her own glorious story. But I had recorded everything. And in the end, my silence, the threatened echo of her own words, had spoken loudest of all.